our favorite version of a joke is where you don't stop at a hat on a hat. You go a hat on a hat on a hat on a hat. And so when you do that, you're actually watching someone create a turducken, you know?
Turkey, duck, chicken.
Chicken in the middle, then the duck, then the turkey.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a thing?
Turducken, exactly.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Hollywood Reporter's Writer Roundtable. I'm very happy to be joined by 6 outstanding writers behind some of the best screenplays of 2022. Chinonye Chukwu, the writer with Keith Beauchamp and Michael Riley of Till, an original screenplay about Mamie Till Mobley, the mother of Emmett Till. Rian Johnson, the writer of Glass Onion and Knives Out Mystery, screenplay adapted from his 2019 film Knives Out. Tony Kushner, the writer with Steven Spielberg of The Fabelmans, an original screenplay about a young aspiring filmmaker. Daniel Kwan, the writer with Daniel Scheinert of Everything Everywhere All at Once, an original screenplay about intergenerational understanding or lack thereof. Martin McDonagh, the writer of The Banshees of Inisherin, an original screenplay about 2 men whose close friendship is suddenly ended by one in 1923 Ireland. And Jordan Peele, the writer of Nope, an original screenplay about a pair of sibling horse wranglers who attempt to capture evidence of a UFO. Thank you guys so much for being here. Quite a group of stories we have to talk about.
Quite a range.
I want to get into sort of the origin stories of each. But first, Tony, Steven Spielberg has made many films that draw upon his own adolescence, Close Encounters, E.T., so many others. But this is the first one to literally directly deal with his own childhood. How did you guys decide to write this story together?
The very first day of the filming of Munich, it was a night shoot, and we didn't know each other really at all at that point, and I asked him to tell me about when he decided that he was going to be a filmmaker. And he told me a number of stories, and one of them was the story that's the central incident in The Fabelmans. I said, that's an amazing story, and you should make a movie of it someday. And he said, well, maybe someday I will. And then we just kept talking. We've worked together now for 20 years. He and I kept going back to it and sort of playing around with it. I didn't really think it was going to happen. And then during West Side Story, his mother had died 2 years before, and his father, who was 102 and a half at that point, was beginning to reach the end. And I think Steven was sort of bracing for that loss. So we had a rehearsal period for West Side Story during the dancing and the singing rehearsals. We started doing sort of more formal interviews, and then during COVID, we decided to get together 3 days a week, 4 hours each time on Zoom, and start writing.
And I know he said he found it therapeutic because it was, I guess, basically right after his father did pass away that you guys were having these conversations that expand into writing together. But Jordan, speaking of Spielberg, you have said that Nope is partly inspired by Steven Spielberg's films and the idea of looking up at the sky, those iconic shots. But moreover, you've said you'd wanted to make a movie that couldn't have been made 5 years ago. Can you talk about what you mean by that?
I'm always sort of shooting for something that's impossible to pull off, and to try and craft something that shouldn't work, but you're taking all the precautions, you're taking all the care and love to put a piece of yourself in it, and to try and honor the audience, to try and give the audience a true journey and adventure the whole time.
Chinonye, I want to ask you, people have been thinking about telling a version of a story about Emmett Till and the tragedy that happened to him and his family for years, not least Barbara Broccoli, who's best known for the Bond movies. I wonder at that point just how you heard that this was something people wanted to tell a story about and put your own angle on it.
Well, Barbara reached out to me about a month or two after my last film premiered at Sundance. And so my immediate response to myself was, no. I'm not in the emotional space for this. I was still adjusting to, the experience I had with Clemency. But Barbara is a persistent person. And I met with her and the other producers, who included Whoopi Goldberg, and meeting them was such an extraordinary experience where I felt really seen and heard and appreciated. And they said the magic words that I think a lot of artists would love, and they said, we believe in your artistry and we want you to tell this story in whatever way that you believe it needs to be told. And thankfully, when I told them that this has to really be centered in Mamie's emotional point of view, she needs to be the protagonist and we need to follow her specific journey, they said that's what they wanted all this time. And then we just started from there.
Daniel, how did you and Daniel Scheinert first start working together? You guys are so closely associated that you are known as the Daniels. And then how did this particular project evolve from being imagined that it would be Jackie Chan at the center of it to focusing instead on the matriarch of the family, played by Michelle Yeoh, and apparently somewhat inspired by your own mother?
So many layers in that question. Okay. How we met, I was just telling Martin that we met at a summer camp, actually. I mean, well, technically we met in class and we really hated each other. We were like polar opposites. I was like the quiet kid in the back who just like was working on his own things, and he was a kid in the front who talked way too much, and we just like judged each other silently. But then we both ended up at a summer camp. It was a filmmakers summer camp. We basically got to run around with these kids around Boston with cameras, and we just, inspired them, try to push them out of their comfort zones, and immediately we're like, oh, that guy, like both Daniels kind of looked at each other like, oh, that person has a very similar energy and attraction to the filmmaking process. And so we started making stuff about 12 years ago, and where this movie came from is probably, I always say that every single time someone lets me make another one, I feel like it might be the last one. And you never know. Either one of us is going to die, or the money's going to run out, or people aren't going to, there's just so many, this is how my brain works. And so I try to put everything I can into a movie just so that I can, if I do pass away, I can feel some sort of peace, It's like, guys,
You look very healthy.
You okay, man?
Yeah,
You all right?
I have a lot of anxiety. And so half of me was like, I want to make the most fun, wild, exciting movie that, invites people to come watch in the theater. And then we also wanted to make sure that whatever we were tapping into felt nourishing to our audiences. We started writing this around 2016, 2017, and we all know how that moment felt. And so we were trying to create a film that tapped into that feeling that we were all experiencing, which was this moment where everything was happening at the same time. Every narrative was kind of colliding, and every contradiction was kind of passing through our chests and shooting out the back of our heads, and we never had a chance to process any single one of them. And so we were like, let's try to make a movie that felt like that, and can we make it feel like that and still give you some hope at the end? Because that's kind of where it all came from.
Great.
And yes, my mother immigrated here from Taipei and has always been, on the one hand, very stereotypical of what an Asian American immigrant mother can be, but at the same time constantly kind of pushing past that. Like, one of the things that is always shocking to people is that she was the one who told me to become a filmmaker, which is, you're an immigrant too, I'm sure. Exactly. Our parents, that is not why they moved here. That is not why they moved here. But my mother saw something in me really early on, and that thing was, she was like, if you don't like something, Daniel, you're really bad at it. And so that's why you're so bad at so many things. Another thing about immigrant parents. and she was like, but I see you have a spark towards story, and I want you to be happy, and I want you to do something good with your life. So even though all my friends think I'm crazy for telling you to go to film school, I'm going to tell you to go to film school. So this movie is a way for me to honor that relationship, but also try to be honest with, all the ways I've made her life hard, So,
Martin, you are British, but have often returned to the country of Ireland and stories set there. This one raises a question, which is essentially, should an artist be willing to give up everything for art? I guess, was that something you'd thought about, or did this originate somewhere else?
I think it's something that we all sort of tend to think about, at least in terms of, are we wasting time when we should be, devoting, more of our energies to it? Should you be doing Like I leave big gaps between movies, and mostly because I'm lazy. And but should I get over that? Should I start making one every 4 years instead of every 5? So yeah, that is something I've that's always sort of been there, and is a part of the film. But also the debate is, do you be a jerk about being an artist, and do you cut off other people? Is it okay to be a shit in the service of art? So to explore, I think I know what my answer is. Hopefully we all share it. It's better to be nice, guys. But the debate is an interest, and I did want to be as even-handed with both points of view as possible in the film. Like my allegiances were obviously towards Colin Farrell's character, I think. As a dimwit myself, not the Cap Collins one character, but to try. So we had rehearsals at the start of the film, and during that period, we kind of tried to make both points of view, if not equal, as close as possible to make an interesting story.
So Rian, you made a film with Knives Out that kind of brought back that genre, I guess, the mystery detective drama in a major way, to the extent that just here we are, I think 3 years later, with another one that by popular demand. And I guess I just wonder, what made you personally want to revisit the world of Benoit Blanc, aside from the fact that everybody else wanted you to?
I mean, there's a lot of different reasons, but I guess for me the big one is just I don't know. I've had a love of this genre since I was a kid, and it kind of all came from me falling in love with Agatha Christie's books, which and her writing, and also the movies that I was watching with my family growing up, like the original Death on the Nile and Evil Under the Sun, and just like family movie night watching those films is kind of implanted in my head as this kind of magical thing. But more than that, though, I feel like it's a genre that is almost like a manufactured to engage with current society. It's a genre where you have a ensemble cast, and each of the characters has to kind of be distinct in a way that almost represents a different thing, and there's a power structure to it with the person at the top who's going to get murdered. It's this gun that's built to fire a bullet, and it hadn't been loaded for a long time, because forever growing up, we've been seeing these movies as period pieces set in a quaint other world that is set in the past. And that's not how Christie was writing. When Christie was writing to her time, it's not like she was an incredibly political writer, but she was engaging with the culture. And so it just felt very exciting, the notion of doing a whodunit and setting it, a very traditional whodunit, and setting it in modern day America and kind of unabashedly engaging with it. It seemed incredibly fun. And then it continues to be really exciting to me what the genre can encompass and how it can be completely different with each film. It just feels kind of like a delivery device that's incredibly potent and incredibly malleable, and that I'm still just really energized by the idea of finding new ways to play with, I guess.
I mean, that's one of the things I love about both of those movies is it doesn't feel concerned with the idea of trying to make a classic, You're very much trying to pull from the context that you're existing in. It feels like you're ripping Twitter conversations right out and just pasting it into the thing, which I think early on as a filmmaker, I always thought okay, how can I make this film classic? How can I make it timeless?
Yeah.
And I think it's a trap, right? And your movies are almost trying to push that logic the opposite direction as far as possible. And for those who have seen the movie, it's wild how relevant your film is to this week, even to this day.
Accidentally.
Right. Well, we have a few people who have things in common that I want to touch upon. Tony and Martin, two of the great playwrights, as well as screenwriters. I've got to ask you, here's something that Martin once said, quote, "One of the fears I had being a playwright was to make a playwright's film," close quote. And I wonder, what does that mean?
Shots fired.
Tell me though, what do you mean by that, and how do you guard against that?
Well, I guess I meant something that was very, very wordy and not cinematic, and just a couple of people drinking tea, speaking in an English accent, and nothing happening for 3 hours. That's the not good side of playwriting that we don't share. But I don't know. I guess it took a while. Like, I found it much easier, I think, to write plays once I was in the middle of that than to try and write film. I couldn't get my head around it for years and years. It was quite...
Even though the thing that apparently got you wanted to be in film before you wanted to be in theater.
And I tried to write films back then, and they were terrible. But plays kind of worked out as I was getting older. But then the first few attempts at screenplay writing, I just couldn't. The fact that you could jump around in time and space, and scenes could be 2 lines long, and then 3 pages, and then that took we don't really do that in plays. It's a scene is like 7 pages long, or it's an act long. So that stuff was a learning curve. Conversely, now I find it harder to go back and write plays because I love being able to jump around. And but yeah, back to the original question. I think just seeing the cinematic landscape, it's having an eye on the image was something to learn, and is the difference between a playwright's film, I guess.
I love that you say that 2 people sitting around drinking tea, because that's not something that's associated with your...
Specifically not, yeah.
A director friend of mine was moving a show into, I forget, it was like the Hudson Theater right after Lieutenant of Inishmore had come down. And they were in tech, and I said, "How's it going?" He said, "It's fine, except blood keeps coming up from the floorboards." And
Will you apologize to him?
Yes. I will.
Well, Tony, how about you? What was the dream at the outset? Theater or film writing?
Oh, I still sort of feel like I'm a playwright, and I actually love movies with enormous amounts of talk, and I don't know about the tea drinking stuff, but I mean, I'm a gay man. I have basically memorized the entirety of the screenplay of All About Eve, and I think that Lincoln is there were people who said this is not a screenplay, it's a play. I mean, for me, and it was during the making of Lincoln that it was like this thunderclap moment. I'm the only person here who's never directed, and I have no interest in directing.
Really?
I can direct theater, okay. I'm really spatially challenged, so when I watch what Steven's doing with the camera, I think I can't even understand it once it's all edited together, and it's like, what? So I'm never going to do that. But the one thing about being a playwright is that you sit in the audience, and there's the picture playing, and it's there, and the experience of observing a theatrical event is it's the audience's entirely. And it was for the first time when I was working on Lincoln that I began to think, oh, actually I could try and indicate somewhere in the script somehow that what we're seeing is not from an objective viewpoint. It's somebody looking at something. I mean, it's like, film school kindergarten. So I'm embarrassed to admit it, but it's like, wow, I remember seeing Halloween, and it was the first time that I got that the camera was sometimes, that was the terror that Carpenter creates, is that you don't know who's watching the thing. Is it an objective camera? Is it
Michael
Myers?
Yes.
And I thought, oh, that's cool. That I understand about film. And then I sort of forgot it. And I for some reason during Lincoln, I think it was my second film, I began to understand that was something you could play with. And that's exciting to me. That is one of the things that I loved about Nope, is that it does reverse the Spielberg gaze. I mean, I loved about Nope is this idea that you keep your eyes to the ground and don't look up at this insane thing that's happening. It's also just, I really love the variation on so the CGI special effects, that the thing starts to look like laundry up in the air, and it's like, what is that? And could they not afford CGI and they were just waving sheets, and then it becomes more and more laundry? I just thought that was so.
I love the way thank you so much. I love the way you said the reversal of the Spielberg gaze is such a cool way to put it. Obviously, I'm hugely inspired by his work and filmmakers who really sort of shoot the moon and go for the magic. And when I was writing this was in 2020, and it was in this time you're describing that that encompasses this time we all were making our movies in. And I was very distracted by this concept of spectacle because I knew I wanted to finally do this. I wanted to make something that used all of my tools, and I wanted to collaborate with the very best in the world. And so, I knew I couldn't quite let myself off the hook with that this would have to be a movie about the human relationship to the spectacle. And during this time, I'm seeing all these things that I'm kind of calling bad miracles, which are these people and these events and these ideas that are often so entertaining and so thrilling that we can be blinded to the danger of them. And so that's what it kind of became about. At the same time, the George Floyd protests are going on. And so this idea that I know, this theme that you're working with in your film as well, of first of all, what photography means to Black people, and what and what a weapon for our civil rights it's been. And so at the same time, I wanted to create a film that sort of indicted the process and indicted the industry that has sort of kept us out of that conversation in a way, and present the dangers of these bad miracles and chasing them, but also give my characters their weapon and their agency to go kind of get there and reclaim something. And so this was in so many ways a love letter to all of these films, but at the same time, I found something in myself that I had to be honest about, which is, I'm chasing a spectacle here, and there's something inherently weird about that if we don't give these spectacles the right attention. If we just give it the entertainment without the recognizing the danger of these things.
Right, because we live in an era where spectacle has become a central feature of politics, and the sort of idolatry towards
That's right. And so I'm
certain orange-colored spectacles, have led us into a terrible, terrible place. So.
And part of the project was how do you make something how do you not put more steam into that, but how do you make something about our inability to recognize what that is?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Chinoye, Jordan brings up the fact that in very different ways the image factors into both of your films. You've described a most revolutionary thing about the Emmett Till story is that you have a mother there who made sure people could not turn away. In a way, the first viral image in the line of things that continue through the viral videos of the George Floyd tragedy and other things of this era. So I wonder if you want to talk about how that made the story even more relevant to the current moment.
Yeah, I mean, I have thought a lot about the difference between what Mamie did versus the video of George Floyd being lynched, right? And Mamie was it was, in a way, an extension of her critical care for the Black community, for her community, for herself. It was a call to action. And she had full agency and ownership over that and control over that experience. And she was very intentional, from the photographer that she chose to capture the image, to the magazine that image was in, to how the open casket funeral was curated. And that's very different than what we're seeing now, where sometimes it's like, if I don't capture this, then no one will ever know, or it's exploitative, or it is a kind of gotcha kind of thing. And so it's a different kind of, I think, intention and ownership and agency over the image, but the power of the image and is still the same, right? And I just want to go back to what you had said, Jordan. It just makes your film. One of the things I love about rewatching your films is that I catch different things all the time, and I never watched your film with thinking about that same kind of cultural and historical context of the power of the image in Black communities and for Black people. And I think that just takes that storytelling and the work that you did, which was already breathtaking, to a whole nother level. And so thank you for that. Now I'm gonna watch it again today
if I can,
with that lens.
Well, thank you. And you know, creating this film really put me in a headspace to appreciate your film even more. I thought it was so beautiful and so important. And I think, you know, for anybody who, you know, asks what the need of these stories and why what's the need to tell these stories, it's quite clear when you see the film what the need is. And especially in a world, as we were discussing, where they're trying to take our stories out of, you know, classrooms. You know, they're trying to take these histories. It's very important to tell them.
Yeah.
And so I just thought it was so difficult what you did, not just emotionally but technically, and just such a beautiful film. I felt very much like we were talking about some of the same things.
Yeah.
I said to you earlier, I think that's also part of the great power of the film is for a film that's about the decision to make people look at something that they don't want to see. There's also these places where you decided to not show as opposed to show, and let the imagination and the right visuals create a sense of horror that's somehow deeper and more profound than it would have been had you been like very explicit, especially in terms of the murder of the kid. It was a real lesson to that the light, the barn and the light and it was really shattering. So and in terms of what you're looking at and what you're not gonna, you know, there's also that sort of that second commandment thing about graven images. There are some things that are so terrible that you're not really allowed to see them. You because the seeing gives us the illusion that we're understanding something about the heart of the experience, and unless you experience it, you can't. So there are some things that you draw the veil across and say, you know, it's back there, but you're not allowed to look at it directly. And I thought that was
really
important
choice. Yeah.
I want to ask Daniel to lead us off on a bit of a topic that also applies this year to Tony and Chinonye, and in other years other projects has applied to others of you, which is the challenges and rewards of writing with someone else, and how you navigate that. Do you, since you've been doing it over a long period with the other Daniel, anything you can say about that?
I mean, I think I look at ideation and all culture through the lens of memetics, so just the way that ideas are battling it out constantly through natural selection to kind of evolve. And so if you look at a environment, a single environment versus two environments, you know, you have this ability to allow ideas to bounce back and forth and basically challenge itself until you get to a place where the best idea kind of rises to the top at a much faster rate than within one environment, within one mind. When you have two people, you can just be braver, you can try things out, you fail faster. And that's what we do. We fail faster. We let the ideas die so that then the next generation can be more, you know, naturally, you know, fit for the environment. And so I think that's why when you look at some of the other directing duos of, you know, the Coen brothers were constantly just playing with genre in ways that no one else was doing at the time. The Wachowski sisters, you know, what they did with The Matrix kind of blew everyone's minds. I look at Lord and Miller, and every one of their movies, they're trying to do something where they push the medium just a little bit further. You know, what they did with Spider-Man is like incredible, not just from a narrative perspective, but also from the technical, just the look and the feel of that animation is like, you've never seen something like that. And so to me, like the reason why me and Daniel are allowed to be so bold and to kind of take these big risks is because there's two of us constantly just throwing ideas back and forth, trying to find that thing that will connect with the audience in a new way. I think so much of our job as storytellers is just reminding audiences of universal, simple truths, because we're such fickle creatures. You know, we learn something, our lives are changed, and then the next week we just go back to where we were. And I think our stories kind of have to keep reminding ourselves of these ideas from a new angle, from a new lens. Otherwise, you know, they start to disappear because of all the spectacle. You know, they kind of get buried by everything else that's kind of coming into their lives. And so our film is about kindness, and that's the most trite, like, you know, naive thing to make a movie about, but we wanted to give audiences a new way into that.
Just a quick follow-up on that.
Yeah.
What's a hat on a hat?
Did Jamie Lee Curtis feed that to you? Because she was, okay. So in like, when you do sketch comedy or you do like a lot, you know, like any sort of comedy, you put a hat on a hat, that's where you put a joke on a joke, and it's no longer funny, right? You ruin the joke because you stack too many concepts on top of each other. And me and Daniel, our favorite version of a joke is where you don't stop at a hat on a hat. You go a hat on a hat on a hat on a hat, and then basically you flip it upside down and you realize the first person was a hat too. So like the whole thing is just like, how far can you go? Because, and I think we're allowed to do that now because audiences are so savvy of tropes, and they understand like all the different conventions. And so when you do that, you're actually watching someone create a turducken. You know, you put the what is it? It's a
Turkey, duck.
Yeah.
Chicken in the middle, then the duck, then the turkey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's a thing?
Exactly, a turducken, exactly. I'm sorry, guys. It's a thing, a turducken. But you would never get to understand what a turducken is unless you understood what each of those individual pieces were. And now that society understands what each of those individual pieces are, they're ready for a turducken. And now that they know what a turducken is. But anyways, we taught that term to Jamie Lee Curtis on set, because she would sometimes come up to us like, why do this? Why are you adding this? And it's like, oh, it's a hat on the hat.
Yeah, right.
And she went home and she found this artist made a hat on a hat. It's a baseball cap wearing a baseball cap. And she gave it to us as a gift.
That's
and I was
great.
like, she's the most thoughtful person who, I don't know how she finds these things, but she's always giving gifts.
That's great.
Yeah.
I want to note what Tony said is that all of you except Tony directed your films that you're here talking about writing, and Tony was a producer of the film that he wrote. So you were all there from beginning to end, and that begs the question for me, when did the writing stop? Are you able to just say it's done and go then focus on directing, or is it always overlapping?
I think it stops for me. I do a few weeks rehearsal at the start of a shoot, so that's the end of the overlap, I think. That's when things can be tweaked a little bit because you're hearing how the actors are doing it and their opinions on the characters and all that stuff. Pretty much after that, I don't change any dialogue or anything about the scenes, But I think I got into directing because I knew that the scripts had to be protected. You know, I'd have almost chosen not to do that if I could have trusted the way it is in theatre, where you've got control, no one can change anything, you pick the director, you pick the actors, all of that. And so it's the knowledge that wasn't going to be there was what sort of, apart from the love of movies, that was a thing that always prompted me to begin to attempt that.
I mean, it's funny hearing it's cool to hear Martin say that. I feel like as opposed to coming into this from kind of the writing and especially theater, where it's very much about the writing, I feel like I came into filmmaking almost from the opposite end, which was kind of growing up making movies with my friends on the weekends, where there wasn't writing and then shooting and then editing. It was just you get your stupid buddies together and you make a stupid little movie. And so it was all one thing kind of. And so for me, I feel like, even though now I do write, but I guess it's a different definition of what writing is, but I feel like the writing process almost ends when they drag my hands away from the Avid, you know, when it's time and you finally have to lock picture, I guess. But the notion of kind of finding the best version of it and swishing stuff around and cutting lines and kind of, you know, everything that I guess it's a different way of using the word writing, but to me, all of that is part of the same thing, I guess. And that doesn't stop till you're done. Yeah.
Do you guys, how much are you thinking about when you're writing something, the audience experience? And I only ask this because somebody noted recently that runtimes of movies have been ticking up and up.
You know, you have the dream of making the 85-minute movie. That's the fantasy, and you always set out with the best intentions. What's that?
This is never going to happen.
Never gonna happen. I know.
no,
I feel like I fail every time.
Yeah, you want to make the movie that it's perfect length, you know. And you're right. It doesn't. There's no real number there.
85.
So you're set on 85.
I'm telling you.
But yeah, a bit of the, obviously a bit of the writing in some ways from the directing standpoint ends up continuing into the edit because you're doing things. But I'm a bit of a turducken head. In that I'm from improv background, so my whole starting place is this idea that there's an infinite amount of good ideas, and there's an infinite amount of bad ideas as well. But there's an infinite amount of good ones, and that's a kind of a freeing notion. And so it becomes a little bit hard for me to finalize anything, especially because I am such a collaborator. I do rely on talking and continuing to discover the characters as we're going, so I'm kind of like Rian, and I'll be known to say the same thing. Like you gotta kill me before you can take it from me. But that's part of my style and the adventure for me.
Well, and you mentioned improv, and I want to ask how strict are each of you about people sticking to the word of the script as written? Tony, I think you want to lead us off, actually.
I have issues about improvising because I think it's a really, really hard thing to do, and I think most people can't do it, and I feel like very often I can tell in a film that I know nothing about the making of when the actors they start calling each other by their names on every line, like, "So Martin, what do you?" And it starts to feel like improv class. When we did West Side Story, Stephen and I really got into we had a lot of fights during West Side Story, and one of them was about we had these brilliant young actors, not the most experienced group, and like a lot of young actors, they think their job is to come in and rewrite the script just from the get-go. And West Side Story was hard because it was a book for a musical, and the speech had to then sort of match Sondheim's lyrics, and they couldn't start talking. So we fought a lot about that. And then right before we started filming the Fabelmans, he said, you're going to really have to keep your temper about this because Seth Rogen is in this movie. He's going to make up everything. I said, but we wrote this. You wrote these lines with me. Don't you want to? But he's amazing. And I said, yeah, he is amazing. He didn't change a single word the entire time.
Wow.
I mean, he was just absolutely, and Michelle, and I mean, there was like, I think if it's a terrible script, then, go for it, whatever you need to do to save yourself. But
that's my strategy. I'm like, I feel like out of all the skill sets I have, writing is my weakest one. And so when we write, we write and we try to make it as perfect as we can, knowing that it's like our perfect is like a 5, compared to most people. And so we go in, and almost every setup, we give the actors 1 or 2, do whatever you want. Just surprise me. Give me something that I wouldn't, as a director, I wouldn't even think of, and we'll see. And a lot of the times it falls flat and doesn't work out. But then you get these magical moments that you would never be able to write, that you would never be able to even think was a good idea, because the actors, are seeing the film from a different perspective. They're inside of the film while you're up here, and when you're inside, you can see things you would never normally be able to notice. And especially with Stephanie Hsu, the character of Jobu Tupaki, such a dumb name. Jobu Tupaki is sort of this embodiment of the nihilist creature within inside the daughter character Joy, who wants to destroy the film. And so we actually gave her that instruction. Sometimes we'd tell her, okay, make fun of this movie, destroy the film. You are above it. You know, like you are up here. You are now directing it. What would you do to ruin this scene? Just to see what would happen. And I think it was like such a playful, exciting way to write that character, and then see how she was able to kind of take our ceiling and push it even further. And some of the stuff that she did during her improv scenes, we actually took and put it into the script with her permission, but we were able to kind of get a little bit of both worlds. Like we love to be precise when it's necessary, but I think catching lightning in the bottle is so wonderful, and it's why we like making movies. I don't think we're not confident enough yet in our work to know exactly what we want sometimes.
And so, Jordan, as the guy who has done improv, do you condone improv on the sets of your movies?
Well, you know, you definitely want the actors to feel like they are improvising. You know, that's when they're doing their best. I mean, the sort of if you do enter a sort of improvisational space, something you'll hear a lot on the film is like, okay, let's get one. Is one on book? Let's get one on book just for safety. You know, so you always, as a director, you know, as a writer, you're trying to put the best script forward. As a director, you're trying to be open, and you are trying to get energy out of it. So the idea for me is always, as long as I get the protected version of the script done, then let's also try and beat it. Let's also try.
Yeah, that's what it's about, beating it. Yes.
It's about beating it.
Yeah.
And so it's a similar.
Is this
thing.
handshake improv? Like, what is that?
Oh,
Like,
that's not improv. But that's just a black thing. Right?
oh, I mean, they were going hard. Bum, 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 bum. I love it.
That's just that. Yeah. That's just that.
Because I love that. In the trailer, I was like, this is hilarious. I love these people. Yeah.
Thank you. No, you know, the people really responded to Kiki and Daniel as siblings. I felt like from the very beginning, you know, I don't have any siblings, but I felt like there was, you know, there's not enough stories about siblings. There's not enough sibling love stories in that sibling way. And I've always been jealous of people who have that support, who have that connection with somebody that no matter what, it's going to be, hey, you see a UFO? All right, let's go buy some security equipment, you know, without doubt. And so, you know, even there's a little bit of that, I think, represented in that moment that's kind of like, that's built up, and you want that trust, and you want that joy. You know, people wanted that black joy.
It's great.
And so what I, again, to just bring to your movie, what I was amazed about your movie is that you were able to bring it to an area of peace.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, and warmth and comfort, and that felt very healing and very difficult.
It's interesting that you say, because there are two movies at the table that are about brother-sister relationships. I mean, Banshees is also, and you're right. I mean, with both movies, you think, this is something that people don't really, you know, I mean, Wagner did it, but I mean, it's like the brother-sister relationship, and in both cases, there's a sort of profound love story going on, and Banshees, it sort of ends in, you know, heartbreak and disaster, but but it's true. It's funny. I mean, that these things that are so completely universal and that everybody sees all the time, and you don't see them explored very often.
What I just want to say about improv was that, so Whoopi Goldberg is I think an improv master, and I quickly learned from the first take that, you know, giving her the space to do that. I'm not married to this words on the page. I really believe in, like, what is best for the film is what reigns supreme. And what I definitely learned that in working with Whoopi, because she just had some golden nuggets where, like, a lot of her first couple scenes were improv. And at first I was a little resistant, but then I was like, man, that's her strength, and just let her shine. And sometimes you just have to be open to that magic, because I realized keeping her so strict to the page, like, it wasn't wasn't natural, you know? And so that was a big lesson I learned in making Till, was the beauty of just letting people shine that way.
So with our last few minutes, I want to just get you to share weirdest writing job you've been approached about.
Right after Angels in America opened on Broadway, I got my first phone call from the film industry was a person calling to ask me if I would be like the 47th person to write the script for the Flintstones.
Perfect. This is funny. Very early on in our careers, Jim Carrey reached out because he had just seen Paranormal Activity, and he was like, guys, it's found footage and it's horror. Have you heard of it? Have you seen this? And we're like, we've heard of it. And we're like, where is this going? And he was like, I haven't seen anyone do that, but with comedy. And I had this great idea because on the set of Dumb and Dumber, it's like famously, it was a haunted set, right? It was the same hotel that The Shining was inspired by. That's where they shot all the stuff in Aspen. And so he's like, the whole time we were shooting the first Dumb and Dumber, things were like breaking and people were getting hurt, doors were swinging, it felt haunted. And so he's like, I'm about to go shoot Dumb and Dumber 2. I want you guys to do a found footage horror comedy on the set of Dumb and Dumber 2 while we're filming. You guys are gonna make a BTS video. It's gonna be a feature-length BTS video that slowly becomes a horror film. And we're like, okay, we're in, 100%, this is amazing. We wrote a whole outline. We were like, this is incredible. We were really excited. We sat down with their producer and we pitched them the idea, and they're like, we're not actually going to make this. I'm sorry. This like Jim got really excited, but there's no way the studio's going to let us do a movie while they're shooting Dumb and Number 2. I'm sorry. And we're like, okay.
That would have been that's a good answer. Yeah. Okay. Do you outline? Do you know the end from the beginning? Martin, no.
Nothing, no. With this one, it was just the two characters, the split, and nothing else.
You don't outline?
Never have.
That's incredible. Wow.
So you just...
I'm the exact opposite.
don't know what he's doing with that vacant kind of. But I think if you're doing something with plot twists, that it's really
well. Because I was going to say, right, you have to, right?
Yeah. So what about your work that has?
You have an incredible amount of plot twists in your,
I know, but I
if he can surprise himself, he can surprise the audience.
Exactly, yeah. I don't have like some phony baloney skeletal ladder that I can at least pretend I've got something to hang on to.
Yeah.
It's too scary to just...
90% of it is outlining for us as well. I wanted to make a movie that started structurally as The Matrix and then end as Magnolia, or something like that. But like we always are playing with like how do we arrange the big pieces, because that's important.
And Ryan, so when you have, obviously these movies are faking us out every step, you have to be outlining.
Well, but even with these movies, but always, that's just kind of the way I learned how to write. Is just the first 90% of the writing process is structure similar to what Tony said.
The David Lynch little thing, how to write. You get 3x5 index cards. You fill out 70 of them. Scene 1, and then you put something in it. Then you go back and you write a scene for each one of those index cards, and then you walk away and you're done.
Okay, so when you're writing, do you like complete silence or a bit of noise of some sort?
Silence.
When I'm outlining, strangely enough, I've written a lot of outlines while The Golden Girls has been playing on, and reruns of Frasier for some, and it's just noise, right, in the background. Like I'm obsessed with The Golden Girls. That's another story. But like, it's just for like the last couple scripts.
So while you're writing,
I'm doing an outline, when I'm writing like the physical, it's complete silence. Sometimes I'll put like film score music on.
That's hard to Till and The Golden Girls. That's
I know.
And Tony, what is for you? You were silent?
I can have I love writing on a subway or in a coffee shop. Music is the only thing I can't. If there's music playing,
music with lyrics or any kind of music.
Any kind of music. If it's a regular tempo, it screws up the rhythms and
music is good for me. I'm because I'm writing what ultimately is scary stuff. I find if I can listen to beautiful or charming or music that is different, I end up landing somewhere really tonally interesting.
I create playlists for every script, and it's like the music has like lyrically nothing to do with the film, but it makes me feel the way I want audiences to
Every
feel.
single script.
Every single script.
Moment I sit down, and then it takes years to write the script. So by the end, the playlist is like 10 days
Yes,
long.
and I just listen to the playlist over and over before I even start the outlining.
Yeah.
Whose opinion about your work do you value the most before locking it in?
My girlfriend.
Okay. She's quite a talented writer herself. Daniel?
Myself. Like, I think it really comes down to like my gut feeling.
My best friend for sure. I mean, she's the realist with me, and I mean, especially as someone who's a Black feminist woman, I'm just like, okay, is Roxane Gay gonna write a think piece about me after this film? Is there anything that I need to be aware of? So she's my go-to for everything.
I have my producer Ian Cooper is probably my closest creative partner, but at the same time, it does have to be this sense of I'm gonna be watching this movie when no one else is. So I gotta get that's what's most important.
Right?
Yeah, it comes down to your gut. I think they said this right. I mean, I have besides my producer, two very good friends of mine, our husband-wife screenwriting team, Dan and Stacey Sheridan, and we've been friends since college, and we just know each other so well that I also know that they'll tell me if something isn't working, which becomes a very valuable coin, I think. Yeah.
Well, Stephen, obviously, and my own counsel, and then also I have my best friend and a couple of very close friends, and I know them really well and for a long time, so I know how much they like something, and also I know the things that they may not like that they're likely not to understand, and so you can say, okay, he didn't get this, but he doesn't ever get things like this.
I believe your husband is also giving you some good
And my
ideas,
husband,
right?
yes,
Great
yes,
writer too.
Yeah, well, and he's extraordinary, and it turns out an amazing casting director.
Mark Harris,
He
yeah.
Cast David Lynch as John
Right.
Ford.
Is he the one that's responsible? Oh my
And
God.
Rita Moreno in West Side Story.
Yeah.
He's like,
Jeez, my God.
Who is the greatest living screenwriter? Not at this table. That takes everybody out of this. So just who do you admire the most as a screenwriter?
Maybe Billy Wilder was the first that came to mind.
But a living.
Oh, living.
Yes.
Is he still alive?
No.
Living.
That's tough.
I like Paul Thomas Anderson.
I know, that's what I was gonna say.
I grew up on like all the Korean auteurs, and so like Park Chan-wook's work has always been so striking, and so I don't know. I look up to the way he is able to pull off what he does, tonally and also structurally. Yeah, some of his stuff is amazing.
Chinoy?
I mean, you took two people. I was gonna say Paul Thomas. Can I just co-sign?
And the reason we admire Paul Thomas Anderson, I think is this to what you said about the supremely cinematic.
Yeah.
He writes movies. He writes movies that he sees, and he puts scenes together that are quintessentially cinematic.
I have to break up the Paul.
Yeah.
That go to your head.
Yeah, right.
No, everything. That's absolutely true. Also, just to shake it up. I mean, for me, the Coen brothers are two of my both how they are incredibly. I was going to use the word wordy. They're very much about the about the writing, about the written word. Although they're also very cinematic. But also, I believe they, like Martin. I've heard just through interviews that they don't outline either. They write similarly. They start and just kind of let it guide them, which is similar to with your writing is miraculous to me. It's like watching somebody do a magic trick, and that I just
Because they're so well structured, aren't they?
Yeah, well, similar. So
We're all doing it wrong, guys.
all of us. That's the main lesson here.
Tony, close us out.
Again, it's not a superlative like.
Fair enough.
But screenwriter I admire immensely is Spike Lee. I love anything that combines deep characterization and really rich, complex politics and wit and originality, and just from from the beginning to now, everything that he does is so always surprising and often, really genuinely profound and beautifully written and stunning. So some of my favorite films of the recent years have been his, and I think he's a great writer.
Well, we have 6 great writers here. Thank you all so much for taking the time, and congrats on the movies, and can't wait to see what you all do next. Thank you.
Thank you.